Hey, what's up, microchurch? A couple weeks ago, we looked at this story in Mark chapter 9, verses 1 through 8, and it's the transfiguration of Jesus, right? And in this story, we see Peter, James, and John and Jesus go up a mountaintop. Jesus transfigures before them. His clothes become radiant white, right? Mark tells us whiter than anyone on earth could bleach them. And the disciples, they see this, right? And it's a story about Jesus putting his glory on full display, right? It's a story about us realizing exactly who he is. And the whole point of it, what we need to understand and what we need to walk away from it is that we don't minimize his glory, right? That we allow ourselves to be in awe and in wonder by his glory and his majesty and his power, right? That we allow ourselves to be curious about what he is doing and what he is up to in our lives and the lives of those around us, and that we end up being captured by the fullness of who he is. And then when that happens, Peter opens his mouth, right? Peter starts to talk, and Peter wants to preserve the moment. He wants to keep it just like it is. So he asks, he says, should we make three tents, one for Jesus, one for Moses, one for Elijah, to all stay in and keep it just like it is? And the truth is, we do this all the time, right? We look back at moments in our lives, we look back at the things that inspired us, and we try to recreate that. We try to hold on to that. We try to go back to that and say, this is what changed me, without looking forward at what God is doing in our lives right now, and without thinking about the glory that's on full display all around us. But when we look at this and continue reading this story, we pick it up in Mark chapter 9, verses 9 through 13. And Mark writes this. He says, as they were coming down the mountain, he charged them to tell no one what they had seen until the Son of Man had risen from the dead. So they kept the matter to themselves, questioning what this rising from the dead might mean. And they asked him, why do the scribes say that first Elijah must come? And he said to them, Elijah does come first to restore all things. And how is it written that the Son of Man, that he should suffer many things and be treated with contempt? But I tell you that Elijah has come, and they did to him whatever they pleased, as it is written of him. And so Jesus, right, he first tells the three disciples here to not tell anyone about what they just saw until after he is risen from the dead. And so what happens on the mountain has to stay on the mountain until Jesus dies and resurrects. But the disciples, they had questions, right? They had things that they wanted answered, and they didn't understand what Jesus was talking about. They didn't understand what Jesus was telling them about raising from the dead. And so they began to ask him questions. Listen, if you want honest questions, right? If you want honest answers, excuse me, ask honest questions. Right? We might not always like the answers that we get, but they will be the truth. Okay, if we want honest answers, ask honest questions. And so the disciples, they start asking these questions about Elijah and what the scribes mean when they say Elijah must come again and all this stuff. And they were probably asking this question because they just saw Elijah and Moses on the mountain talking with Jesus. And then Jesus answers them, right? He said, Elijah does return. In fact, he already did come in the form of John the Baptist. Matthew 17, verse 13 makes that point very clear. I want you to check it out. But then they treated him however they wished, right? They even killed him, beheading him. And they're going to do the same with Jesus. That's exactly what Jesus is saying in this moment. So Jesus is again affirming that he's going to have to suffer, and that he's going to have to die at the hands of the religious elite, at the hands of mankind. Right? That was his mission. That's his purpose. Right? That's what he came to do. That's how he's establishing his kingdom. And so this story, all of it, the transfiguration, it's a story of the glory of Jesus, while at the same time, it's a story that reinforces the truth of our suffering Savior, right? A suffering Savior that we desperately need. Right? We need both. We need his glory on full display in our lives. Right? We need his glory to remind us of his power and of his majesty and of his might and about who he is, that he's the creator and sustainer of all things. And we need his suffering to endure the cross, right? Because we cannot could not do it on our own, right? We need to be reminded of his suffering, because it is there in that moment, is in his suffering, that we're reminded and that we realize we can approach him, that he does love us and that he does care for us, that we need both. And so Jesus, he's making himself known in this passage. He was revealing himself in his full glory to his disciples, so they can understand who he truly is. And the more that they understood who he truly is, the more they would follow him. Right? That's what discipleship is. Discipleship, it's a becoming, right? It's a becoming more and more like Christ in our everyday lives. It's following Christ's lead in our lives, no matter where it takes us and no matter what it costs us. Someone once said this, that you become what it is that you behold. See, Jesus wants us to behold him, to be captured by his glory, to be captured by his majesty. And the more that we're captured by his glory, the more that we're going to live into who he says that we are, which is a loved child of God. And so my prayer for you this week is that you don't fall into temptation of minimizing Jesus's glory in this passage or in our lives. Right? That we don't try to overcomplicate things, we don't try to over-explain them or try to over-apply it to our lives, but that we become more and more and more captivated by his glory, so that we let his glory do its transforming work in our lives. Behold him so that you can become more like him.